Judge Elias Thorne sneered into his microphone. "People like you don't belong here." He saw only plain clothes, not the steel of a former federal agent. He had no idea she wasn't there to win a case. Evelyn Hayes had come to settle a score. At the defendant's table, her brother Malik sat alone, hands cuffed, eyes fixed on the floor. He looked utterly defeated. As Evelyn took the empty chair beside him, a bailiff immediately broke from the wall. His face was tight with authority. "Ma'am," he snapped, hand near his belt. "That seat is for licensed counsel only. Show me your identification." Pause for a moment. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning. This happens around us every day. So take a breath, listen close, and if this moves you, like, subscribe, and share it, because someone out there needs to hear this too. Now, Evelyn didn't flinch. She slowly opened a folder on the table and slid out a single folded document. The bailiff snatched it, unfolded it, and froze. His jaw muscle twitched. The paper wasn't just official. It was undeniable. "Stay put," he muttered, turning on his heel. He marched straight to the bench. Judge Thorne deliberately shuffled papers, making a show of not looking up. "We allow public observers," he drawled to no one in particular, "not participants." The bailiff leaned in, handed him the document, and whispered something. That's when the judge finally looked up. His eyes found Evelyn and locked onto her, studying her like a problem to be erased. A small, cruel chuckle escaped his lips. "Well now," he said, leaning back. "Representing the accused, are we?" Evelyn's voice was calm and steady. "I am, Your Honor." The judge shook his head, a mocking smile playing on his lips. He looked out at the gallery. "I love these. Always a good show." A few nervous chuckles echoed from the back rows. Evelyn's eyes never left his. "Is there a problem with the paperwork?" The judge's smile vanished. "Ms. Hayes," he said, picking up the paper, "are you aware this is a felony case? That your brother faces a decade behind bars?" "I am," she replied. "And you, a layperson, intend to act as his counsel?" He scoffed. "This isn't some neighborhood dispute. This is a court of law. A real one." Malik looked up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. Evelyn's voice didn't get louder, but it sharpened. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I am well aware of the law." Judge Thorne leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Knowing the law and practicing it, Miss Hayes, are two very different things." She met his gaze without blinking. "I've done both." A dead silence fell over the room. The air crackled. The moment stretched for a half-second too long. Visibly flustered, the judge slapped his file shut. "Fine," he grumbled. "Let's just hope your little courtroom experiment doesn't waste all of our time." It was then that a man in the back row, dressed in a plain gray suit with an expression carved from stone, made a single note on his pad. Malik leaned in, whispering, "Evie, you don't have to do this." Her eyes stayed locked on the judge. "Yes," she whispered back. "I do." Judge Thorne banged his gavel. "Let's begin," he declared. But it was too late. Something had already begun the moment she walked through those doors, and the prosecutor, rising slowly with the practiced ease of a man who believed the outcome was already decided, was about to find that out. The prosecutor stood and began talking in circles. He had no facts, only mud. He spoke of Malik's known associations and a pattern of behavior, but offered zero proof. No names, no pictures, just smoke. Evelyn let him finish his little speech. Then she stood. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid out the professional truth. "Your Honor, we haven't received the forensic reports. We haven't seen the chain of custody for the weapon or the fingerprint analysis. We have nothing to support what the prosecutor is claiming." Judge Thorne waved her off like she was a fly. "The gun was in the car, Miss Hayes. That's that." "The car wasn't registered to my brother," Evelyn said flatly. "And the arrest report says there were no prints on the weapon. Those are the facts." The judge glared at her, He didn't like being corrected. "What I see," he said, his voice full of acid, "is you trying to make trouble where there isn't any." He leaned into the microphone. "You're shopping for justice from the discount aisle council." He had just called her cheap trash. Right there in front of everyone. He was telling the entire room that people like her and her brother weren't worth the court's precious time. Malik felt his stomach drop. It was that old familiar feeling of being made small, of being powerless while a man in charge decided you weren't worth respecting. But Evelyn stood her ground. "Objection," she stated, her voice quiet but firm. "The court will not make personal comments about the defense." Thorne just smirked. A little sarcasm is allowed. Miss Hayes, her eyes, like chips of dark obsidian, fixed on him. So was a little respect. The room went dead quiet. Even the prosecutor looked down at his shoes. The judge's face turned a mottled red. He banged his gavel, but the sound was weak, hollow. He had lost control, and he knew it. In the back, the man in the gray suit wrote something down. Evelyn sat. Malik leaned over. "Are you all right?" "This is the easy part," she said, her gaze still locked on the judge. One had to wonder what kind of battle she'd survived if this was the easy part. That night, an old case file lay open on her desk. It wasn't about reliving pain. It was a stark reminder. A reminder of every smug, smiling man like Judge Thorne she had ever faced. A reminder of what happens when you stay silent. When you let them get away with it. This wasn't about old anger. This was about old lessons. And she was about to deploy every single one. The ache she felt wasn't just from the courtroom. It was an old wound, dormant for years, now throbbing anew because a man like Judge Thorne had been arrogant and foolish enough to poke it. The file's cover was stamped confidential. Inside lay the story of a woman who once wore a federal agent's badge and believed in its power. She wasn't just any agent. She was one of the youngest investigators in the Capital City Bureau. The only black woman leading a major corruption probe called Operation Cornerstone. She hunted dirty cops and their laundered cash. She remembered the exact day it all shattered. The agent she trusted most, a kid she'd mentored, sold her out, handing her field notes straight to a crooked U.S. attorney. The official story. They told her the operation was too unstable. Shut down. Weeks later, the men she investigated received promotions. She got a desk with no computer, no cases. They buried her. She hadn't fought back then. She believed if she stayed quiet, the system would eventually right itself. She learned a hard lesson. Justice doesn't move unless someone gives it a shove. Her sleeve slipped back, revealing the faint line of a scar on her wrist. She remembered its origin. A botched night operation. A target she shouldn't have chased alone. Her backup never arrived. Not because they were late. They were never sent. When she returned to HQ and found her report deleted, she stopped lying to herself. They hadn't forgotten her. They had abandoned her. On purpose. Now, years later, she was back in a courtroom. Not as an agent with a badge, but as a woman with a folder, defending a brother who couldn't afford anyone else. She looked at the wall but saw no plaster. She saw Judge Thorne smirking from a bench he didn't deserve. He reminded her of every man who had ever smiled while telling a lie. This wasn't just a personal insult. This was history. She hadn't returned for closure. She'd come back to finish the job they had tried to bury. No one in that courtroom knew her story. Not the jury. Not even Malik. But now you do. The next morning, her first move was to call the prosecution's star witness. The state calls Damon Wells. The kid shuffled forward, looking like a deer caught in headlights. His sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, echoing in the tense silence. He was young. Not just in years, but in spirit. He looked terrified, clinging to the edge of the witness chair as if he might fall. Evelyn rose slowly. She didn't approach him like a predator. She simply watched him for a moment, letting the room settle. Then she spoke, her voice low and calm. Damon, you told the detectives you saw my brother Malik on the night of November 7th. Is that right? The kid cleared his throat. Yes, that's what I told them. Evelyn took a slow step forward. And what exactly did you see? Damon blinked, his eyes darting around the room. Someone running from the alley. They were holding something, but I couldn't see what. And could you see who it was? Damon hesitated, swallowing hard. His eyes flickered toward the prosecutor. It was dark, he finally mumbled. But the detective, he told me they had Malik. Evelyn didn't press him. She just waited, letting the courtroom silence do her work. Damon Wells' knee bounced up and down. He risked a look at the prosecutor, who was suddenly fascinated by his own shoes. Evelyn's voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension. Let me ask you a simpler question, Damon. Did you actually see my brother that night, or were you just repeating what the detective told you to say? That was it. That was the question that broke him. Damon's voice cracked. He told me it had to be Malik, the kid admitted, the words spilling out. He said I'd be in trouble if I didn't back up their story. The collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The raw truth had just crashed down, heavy and undeniable. Judge Elias Thorne slammed his gavel, his voice strained. This witness is speculating. Evelyn Hayes turned, her gaze like cold steel. He's not speculating, Your Honor. He's confessing. The judge's finger trembled as he pointed. You're out of line, Ms. Hayes. And you're out of order, she shot back, her voice unwavering. If you believe threatening a witness is merely part of your game, this courtroom demands truth, regardless of your comfort with it. The room plunged into absolute silence. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Judge Thorne looked like a captain whose ship had been seized mid-voyage. On the stand, the terror in Damon Wells' eyes dissolved, replaced by pure, unburdened relief. But Damon wasn't finished. He looked directly at Evelyn, his voice thick with emotion. You probably don't remember me, he said. The words meant more for her than the court. But I remember you. You visited my high school years ago. For a justice prep program, a low murmur swept through the jury box. You told us, Damon continued, a sad smile touching his lips, that truth always shouts louder than fear. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. He took a shaky breath. I guess I forgot that until today. Then it happened. From the back of the gallery, a single person began to clap. A slow, steady, defiant rhythm. The judge erupted, leaping to his feet, his face a furious purple. He hammered the gavel so hard the microphone shrieked. Order. This is not a performance. Another sound, and I will clear this gallery. The clapping ceased, but it was too late. Evelyn didn't even glance at the judge. She offered the young man on the stand a small, knowing smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding. She walked back to her table. You used to do that in the classrooms, Malik whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Every Thursday, she confirmed with a nod. In the back row, the man in the gray suit, who had been motionless for days, finally stirred. He leaned forward, offering a single, slow nod of acknowledgement. Evelyn felt its weight more than she saw it. As she reached for her folder, her sleeve snagged, pulling back for a fleeting second. Under the harsh courtroom lights, a long, jagged scar on her wrist flashed into view. It was just a scar, but it was everything. That's a Kevlar burn, one bailiff murmured to his partner. You don't get those from pushing paper. The whisper rippled through the room. At the bench, Judge Elias Thorne froze. His face went ashen. He stared at Evelyn as if she were a ghost from a past he thought buried. She wasn't supposed to come back, he breathed almost inaudibly. But Evelyn heard him. Malik leaned in, his eyes wide. You told me you walked away from all that. Evelyn took a quiet breath, her gaze still fixed forward. I thought I did, she admitted. In that instant, everyone saw her for what she truly was. Not just a sister. Not just another lawyer. The mask had fallen. The man in the gray suit was no longer observing a court case. He was observing a predator he had profoundly underestimated. The judge's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. The silence in the room now felt different. It was heavy with unspoken questions, with history, and with a distinct, chilling sense of dread. Judge Thorne made his final, fatal mistake. Leaning into his microphone, he sneered, "You people always believe you can twist the law to suit your anger." The room went cold. Before the insult could fully register, Evelyn was on her feet. "We don't twist the law, Your Honor," she stated, her voice quiet yet dangerous. "We hold it up to a mirror. This isn't a classroom, Miss Hayes," he spat. "No," she agreed, her voice laced with quiet power. "Because in a classroom, I'd be forced to teach you the very principles of justice you've clearly forgotten." Her words hung in the air, a stunning, undeniable indictment. Visibly panicked, the judge saw the man in the gray suit give a subtle, almost imperceptible signal from the back. "This court is adjourned for the day," Thorne barked, trying desperately to flee the scene. Evelyn stood firm. "Justice doesn't adjourn early just because you're uncomfortable, Your Honor." As if on cue, the courtroom doors burst open. 3 federal agents in dark suits entered, striding purposefully toward the bench. The lead agent held up a warrant. "Judge Elias Thorne, you are under arrest. Obstruction of justice, civil rights violations, abuse of judicial authority." "This is my courtroom," Thorne croaked, his face pale with terror. "No, sir," the agent said coldly, taking the gavel from the judge's desk. "This is the people's courtroom, and they've been watching." The agents cuffed the judge's hands behind his back. The sharp click of the metal echoed in the silent room, the definitive sound of a corrupt man's career ending. The lead agent turned. "All charges against Malik Hayes are dismissed, effective immediately." The bailiffs unlocked Malik's handcuffs. He stood and pulled his sister into a fierce, grateful hug, finally free. As the disgraced judge was led away, the man in the gray suit approached Evelyn. He spoke in a low voice, meant only for her. "Your complaint from all those years ago finally found the right desk, Agent Hayes. You started this." Evelyn watched her brother, saw the profound relief on Damon Wells' young face, and looked at the now empty judge's bench. This was more than a victory. It was a restoration. She hadn't just won a case. She had forced the system to confront its own reflection, and for one day at least, see clearly.